At 38 years old, Trey believed in the integrity of a system. As a quality assurance engineer for Boeing in Chicago, his entire professional life revolved around precision, accountability, and the brutal honesty of data. For a salary of $114,000 a year, he inspected the intricate skeletons of aircraft, ensuring that every rivet, every wire, every hydraulic line was exactly where it was supposed to be, capable of withstanding pressures the average person could never imagine. He was a good man, a measured man, a man whose deep brown skin seemed to hold the steady warmth of his character. He believed that if you followed the process, the outcome would be sound. He applied the same logic to his marriage. For 10 years, he had been married to Eshe. And for the last 6 of those years, they had been operating under a system of their own: aggressive saving. They lived in the one-bedroom West Loop condo Trey had purchased for $320,000 before he ever met her, a premarital asset he was proud to use as their shared foundation. The plan, as Eshe had so enthusiastically laid it out, was to save every spare dollar of his substantial income. They would build a fortress of financial security, a launch pad for the future she so often described in vivid, breathless detail, a future with a sprawling house in Lincoln Park, children in private school, and European vacations. Trey, a man who found contentment in simple things, a well-made tool or a quiet evening, was happy to provide the foundation for her dreams. He believed they were building it together. He believed in the system. This belief was the reason he was standing in a ridiculously expensive rented event space just a few blocks from his own condo, preparing to celebrate their 10th anniversary. The party had been Eshe's idea, of course. It cost $5,000, a figure that made Trey's stomach clench. He had suggested a nice dinner, maybe a weekend trip to a quiet cabin in Michigan, but Eshe had insisted. 10 years is a milestone, Trey, she'd said, her voice laced with that familiar, gentle condescension she used when she felt he was being too provincial. We have to celebrate it properly. It shows people were serious. He had no idea what was coming. He didn't understand that the system he trusted had been corrupted from its very core, and that the woman standing beside him, a vision in a $2,500 silk dress, was the source of the critical failure. He was about to learn that for 6 years, his sacrifices had not been feeding their shared dream. They had been funding a secret. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into something, only to discover the foundation was a lie? Tell us about a time you felt a deep sense of betrayal in the comments below. We read every single one. What Trey was about to experience was a system failure of catastrophic proportions, and the fallout would be devastating. The facade of their life was a masterpiece of domestic normalcy, meticulously curated by Eshe and dutifully funded by Trey. Their days followed a predictable rhythm, a quiet testament to what Trey thought was a shared goal. At 6:15 a.m., his alarm would sound. He'd slide out of their shared queen-sized bed, careful not to wake Eshe, his movements economical and quiet. In the kitchen of his West Loop condo, with its floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the glass and steel towers of the city, he'd start the coffee. A simple $89 Mr. Coffee machine, one he'd had for years. Eshe often complained about it. Trey, my friend Janelle has a $700 Jura E8. The coffee tastes completely different. Trey would just smile and pour her a cup. Ours gets the job done, babe. He would pack his lunch, a turkey sandwich on whole wheat, an apple, and a bag of pretzels. The total cost was maybe $8. He'd see the evidence of Eshe's lunch on their shared credit card statement later. A $28 salad from the Goddess and Grocer, a $7 cold-pressed juice. When he'd once gently questioned it, she'd waved a dismissive hand. It's a networking lunch, Trey. It's important for my brand. Her job was a part-time marketing consultant role that brought in, at most, $30,000 a year. But she spoke of her brand as if she were a Fortune 500 company. He'd leave for the Boeing facility in his 2018 Honda Accord, a car he'd paid off 2 years early by making aggressive extra payments. It was his pride and joy, a symbol of his fiscal discipline. Eshe refused to be seen in it, preferring to take a $30 Uber XL if she needed to go anywhere her own leased Acura RDX. A $42,000 vehicle with a monthly payment of $580s couldn't take her. "The optics, Trey," she'd explain, as if it were obvious. "I can't show up to meet a client in that." Their finances were, on paper, a model of partnership. His $114,000 salary was direct deposited into their joint checking account. From there, Eshe, who had proclaimed herself the CFO of our family, managed everything. She paid the bills, the mortgage on his condo, which he technically owned outright, but she insisted on calling a shared expense. And most importantly, she made the transfers to their high-yield savings account. "Look at this, Trey," she'd said one evening about 6 years ago, showing him an article on her iPad. "We are leaving money on the table. We need to be more aggressive." She'd proposed a new budget. They would live on a fraction of his income. The rest, including his entire annual bonus from Boeing, which ranged from $10,000 to $15,000, depending on the year, would be swept directly into savings. "We won't even see it," she'd promised. "It'll be our secret weapon. In 5 years, we'll have the down payment for a house in Kenwood." Trey, who trusted her implicitly, had been thrilled. He was a builder. He understood the power of incremental progress. He imagined their savings like a carefully constructed airframe, growing stronger and more robust with each contribution. He cut back everywhere he could. He stopped buying new clothes, content with his practical Carhartt jackets and $45 work boots. He brown-bagged it every single day. He used the same $150 Timex watch he'd worn for a decade, even as she acquired a $4,000 Cartier tank watch she claimed was a family heirloom he'd never heard of before. The sacrifices felt real and shared. When the plumbing in the condo had a minor leak, he spent a weekend learning how to fix it himself with $75 worth of parts from Home Depot, saving them the $800 a plumber would have charged. Eshe had been annoyed by the noise. "Can't we just pay someone to do this, Trey? It's so undignified." He'd wiped grease from his hands and smiled. "That's $725 more for the house fund, babe." She hadn't smiled back. That should have been a sign. But he was a man who believed in the system, and the system was his wife. He had no idea the system was designed to bleed him dry. The outrage when he looked back had been accumulating for years, a slow-building pressure behind a dam. He just hadn't known how to read the instruments. The signs were all there, disguised as personality quirks, moments of ambition, or simple differences in taste. In hindsight, they were scenes from a long and calculated betrayal. There was the incident with his family. His younger sister Maya had just graduated with her master's degree. Trey was immensely proud. He and Eshe drove down to Champaign for the ceremony. Afterward, his parents hosted a small backyard barbecue at their modest home. His father, a retired postal worker, was manning his pride and joy, a $300 char-broil grill. His mother had made her famous potato salad. The air was filled with laughter and the sound of gospel music playing softly from a portable speaker. Eshe had stood apart from it all, scrolling through her phone, a polite but rigid smile fixed on her face. Later, in the car on the way back to Chicago, she'd sighed dramatically. "Your family is sweet, Trey. They really are. But it's also simple." "What's wrong with simple?" Trey had asked, his hands tightening on the wheel of his Honda. "Nothing," she said, the word drawn out to mean everything. "It's just, I want more for us. I don't want to end up in a small house with a cheap grill talking about pensions. I want us to be a power couple, like the Obamas, but in finance and marketing." Trey had felt a flash of anger. "My father worked for 35 years to earn that pension. That cheap grill has fed our family at every holiday for a decade. There is dignity in that, Eshe." "Dignity doesn't get you a table at Alinea," she had retorted, turning to look out the window. The conversation was over. He had let it go, chalking it up to her ambition, her drive. He didn't realize she was insulting the very values he was using to fund her secret life. That was an outrage moment he didn't recognize. Then there were the vacations, or the lack thereof. Trey worked hard. The precision required in his job was mentally exhausting. Once a year, he wanted to unplug completely. "What do you think about going to Zion National Park this year?" he'd asked one spring, showing her pictures of the majestic red cliffs on his computer. "We could rent a cabin, go hiking. We could do the whole trip for under $2,000. Eshe had looked at the screen with open distaste. "Hiking? With the dirt and the bugs? Trey, be serious. Janelle and her husband just got back from a week at a $1,500 a night villa in Lake Como. That's a vacation. What you're describing is glorified camping." "But the budget, Eshe," he started. "The budget is exactly why we can't afford to waste money on a pointless trip like that," she'd said, her logic twisting in on itself. "We are saving for our future. Every dollar has to be an investment. Lake Como is an investment in our social standing. Zion is a liability." They didn't go anywhere that year. 2 months later, a charge for a $4,800 stay at a luxury spa in Sedona appeared on her personal credit card, which she paid off immediately. When he asked, she said it was a work retreat that her client had paid for. He believed her. He had no reason not to. The most cutting moments were about his job. He knew his work wasn't glamorous. It was methodical, painstaking, and happened in a sprawling, sterile facility far from the trendy restaurants of Wicker Park where she spent her afternoons. One night they were at a dinner party with some of her friends. One of the husbands, a man named Derek who worked in private equity, was holding court. He talked about leverage, about acquisitions, about the abstract movement of vast sums of money. Later, at home, Eshe was buzzing. "Did you hear Derek? That's what I'm talking about, Trey. He moves markets. He creates wealth out of thin air. It's so powerful. He's a vulture capitalist, Eshe. He buys companies, fires half the staff, and sells the assets. The wealth he creates comes from destroying people's livelihoods," Trey said, unbuttoning his shirt. She scoffed, a sound full of disappointment. "You just don't get it. Your job, it's so physical. You're just checking things other people have already built. It's a job, I get it. But it's not a career with a narrative. There's no legacy in quality assurance." Each word was a small, sharp blade. He was the man who ensured a 300-ton aircraft could fly safely across an ocean, a job that protected thousands of lives a day. But in her eyes, he was just a glorified mechanic with no narrative. He was a bank account, a funding source for the real story she was writing for herself, a story in which he was only a footnote. He absorbed the cruelty, burying it under the belief that he was providing for his wife, that her happiness was his success. He didn't understand that her happiness was dependent on his ignorance. The pressure in the system was reaching a critical level, and the anniversary party was about to trigger a complete and total structural failure. The party was held at a venue called the Glass House in the West Loop, a sterile white space with panoramic views of the Chicago skyline. Eshe had chosen it for its architectural significance, a phrase that really meant it was expensive and looked good on Instagram. The $5,000 rental fee, which Trey had reluctantly agreed to, didn't even include the catering or the open bar. As he stood there in his best and only suit, a well-made but unremarkable $600 offering from Brooks Brothers, he felt like a component that didn't quite fit the assembly. Eshe, on the other hand, was in her element. She moved through the crowd of her friends and a few of his bewildered colleagues, a radiant queen in her own court. Her dress, a shimmering column of emerald green silk that cost an absurd $2,500, clung to her body. Her hair was styled in elegant twists, catching the light. She held a flute of 150 a bottle Veuve Clicquot, laughing a little too loudly at a joke one of her marketing friends made. Trey was nursing a simple glass of club soda. He had to drive home. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low thrum of a curated playlist of neo-soul. He watched Eshe accept compliments on her party, on her impeccable taste. He felt a familiar pang of otherness, the same feeling he got when she talked about her friends' husbands in finance. He was the stable, reliable ground crew, and she was the pilot, soaring in social stratospheres he couldn't comprehend and didn't particularly want to. At 8:47 p.m., the system failed. It came in the form of Eshe's cousin, Ravi. Ravi was a loud, affable guy who'd had about 5 glasses of champagne too many. He worked in commercial real estate and carried himself with the unearned confidence of someone who had always had a safety net. He clapped Trey on the shoulder, his grip a little too tight. "Trey, my man, 10 years," he boomed, his voice cutting through the ambient chatter. A few nearby conversations paused. 10 years, putting up with this one. He gestured expansively toward Eshe, who smiled a tight, warning smile. "You are a saint, my friend. A damn saint. All her spending. That woman can shop." Trey offered a weak smile. "She has good taste." Ravi laughed, a loud, wet sound. "Good taste? Man, she has expensive taste. It's a good thing she's got that secret stash." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still loud enough for everyone within a 10-foot radius to hear. "Ha! Still hiding that Chase account from Trey?" The words hung in the air, suddenly heavier than anything in the room. The music seemed to fade. The chatter died. It was as if a vacuum had sucked all the sound out of the space, leaving only Ravi's stupid, drunken question echoing in the sudden silence. Trey's eyes moved from Ravi's flushed, confused face to his wife. Eshe froze. It was not a subtle thing. It was a complete system lockup. The warm, socialite smile on her face didn't just fade, it shattered, leaving behind a mask of pure, crystalline panic. Her luminous, deep brown skin went ashen. Her hand, the one holding the champagne flute, trembled almost imperceptibly. Her eyes, wide with horror, were locked on Ravi, but they were seeing Trey. Trey felt nothing. It was the strangest sensation. He had expected a surge of anger, a hot flash of betrayal. Instead, a profound and unnerving calm washed over him. It was the same feeling he got at work just before identifying a catastrophic, line-stopping failure. The emotional part of his brain shut down and the analytical part took over. Hidden Chase account. Stash. 6 years. The data points clicked into place. The aggressive saving. Her complaints about his simple tastes. Her expensive clothes and trips that were always gifts or work-related. The numbers began to scroll through his mind. His bonuses, the extra payments, the lunches he'd skipped. He looked at his wife, at her frozen, guilty face. The woman he loved. The woman he had trusted with every dollar he earned and every dream he had. And he saw a stranger. A very, very good liar. He didn't say a word. He didn't look at Ravi again. He turned his head slowly and looked at the champagne flute in his own hand. He'd been holding it all night. He walked to the nearest high-top table, a sleek, white disc of manufactured stone. With absolute precision, he set the glass down. The base made a soft, deliberate click against the surface. It was the loudest sound in the world. Then he turned, and without looking at his wife, without acknowledging anyone, he walked out of the party. He left her there, frozen in the wreckage of her own creation, a statue of guilt in a $2,500 dress. The party was over. Trey walked out of the glass house and into the cool Chicago night. The rain had started, a fine, misty drizzle that felt like a baptism. It clung to his suit jacket and cooled the strange, empty heat in his chest. He didn't go to his car. He just walked. He walked east on Randolph Street, past the glowing windows of expensive restaurants where people were laughing, oblivious. He walked under the L tracks, the roar of the train overhead a welcome noise that filled the ringing silence in his head. He was not playing dumb. He was processing data. The words "hiding that Chase account" were a red flag, a critical anomaly in the system he had trusted for a decade. His mind, trained to trace failures back to their source, was already working. He wasn't thinking about the love, the shared memories, the laughter. He was thinking about wire transfers. He was thinking about bank statements. He was thinking about the exact phrasing of their aggressive savings plan conversation from 6 years ago. He heard footsteps hurrying behind him, the click-clack of heels on wet pavement. Trey, wait!" It was Eshe. She caught up to him under a streetlight, her face a mess of rain and running mascara. The emerald silk of her expensive dress was now dark with moisture, clinging to her uncomfortably. It looked cheap in the harsh yellow light. "Trey, please," she panted, grabbing his arm. He stopped walking but didn't turn to face her. He just looked straight ahead, at the rain-slicked street. "He's drunk, Trey. You know how Ravi is. He talks nonsense when he's drunk. He was just making a stupid joke." Trey said nothing. His silence was not a tactic. It was a state of being. He was no longer a participant in their conversation. He was an observer, collecting evidence. Her immediate response was a lie, a predictable, clumsy lie. Data point 1. "It's not what you think," she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "It's nothing. It's a small account I opened years ago. For emergencies, like for my parents if they needed something. It's my money." My money. The words landed with the finality of a judge's gavel. Not our money, not money for us. My money. Data point 2. He finally turned to look at her. His face was a blank mask. The warmth that usually resided in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, flat void. It terrified her more than shouting would have. "Get in the car, Eshe," he said, his voice level, devoid of any emotion. The drive back to the condo was 5 blocks of the heaviest silence he had ever experienced. The only sound was the rhythmic swoosh thump of the windshield wipers on his Honda Accord. Eshe kept trying to fill the void, her words tumbling out in a frantic, desperate stream. "It was for security, you know. A woman needs her own security. My auntie always said you can't ever fully depend on a man. Not that I don't depend on you. I do. But it was just a little cushion, a safety net." He pulled into their parking garage, the car's headlights illuminating the concrete wall. He killed the engine. The silence returned, thicker than before. "How much is in the account?" he asked. The question was quiet, almost casual. She hesitated, a flicker of calculation in her eyes. "I don't know exactly. Not much. Maybe 20,000? 30 at most." Data point 3. The lie about the amount. His mind was a clean, cold machine. A person who was telling the truth would know the approximate balance of their safety net. A person who was lying would lowball the number, hoping to minimize the damage. They went up to the condo. He walked directly to the linen closet and took out a pillow and a blanket. He walked to the living room couch, a simple, functional piece they'd bought for $1,200 from Crate and Barrel. Eshe followed him, her panic escalating. "What are you doing, Trey? Talk to me. Don't shut me out. We can fix this. It's just a misunderstanding." He placed the pillow on the couch. He began to unfold the blanket. She reached out to touch his arm, her fingers cold and trembling. Baby, please, don't do this. He moved his arm away, a small, final gesture of disengagement. He looked at her, at the beautiful face that had become a stranger's mask, the quiet, devastating line he had been formulating since he set his glass down finally emerged. "The party's over, Eshe." He turned his back on her and lay down on the couch, fully clothed. He faced the back of the sofa, presenting her with a wall of silent, unforgiving stillness. He heard her gasp, then a choked sob. He closed his eyes and began compiling a list in his head. A list of documents he would need. Pay stubs, bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns. The engineer was preparing his report. The system had failed, and he was about to document every single point of failure. The weekend was a silent war conducted across the 900 square feet of his condo. Eshe oscillated between tearful apologies, angry accusations, and desperate attempts at normalcy. She made him coffee on Saturday morning, using the hated $89 Mr. Coffee machine as a pathetic peace offering. He poured it down the drain and made his own. She tried to talk about the party, about how everyone was calling, worried. He put on his headphones and sat at the small desk in the corner of the living room, the screen of his laptop casting a blue glow on his impassive face. He was a man on a mission. The fog of shock had lifted, replaced by the cold, clear focus of his professional training. He was conducting a failure analysis. For 2 days, he worked with methodical precision. He logged into his Boeing employee portal and downloaded every pay stub from the last 6 years. He logged into their joint bank account and exported every transaction statement into a massive spreadsheet. He went through 6 years of their shared credit card statements, highlighting every one of Eshe's extravagant purchases she had claimed were on sale or a gift from a client. The numbers told a brutal story. He could see his bi-weekly paycheck of $384 landing in the account. He could see the automatic transfers Eshe had set up. But they weren't all going to the Ally High Yield Savings account they had opened together. He cross-referenced the dates. On the day after his annual bonus from Boeing was deposited, $2,500 in 2018, $14,000 in 2019, $11,000 in 2020 due to the pandemic, then back up to $15,000 for the next 3 years, a large portion of it would vanish, not to their shared savings, but to an external account he didn't recognize. The transfers were labeled innocuously. External savings transfer? He did the math. He added up the diverted bonus money. He found smaller monthly transfers of $7 or $500 that also went to the same mysterious account. He calculated the total. His hands were steady, but a cold fire was burning in his gut. The number he landed on was sickening. Over 6 years, she had siphoned off more than $180,000 of his income. His income. The money he had earned through long hours and mental exhaustion. The money he had sacrificed for, eating his sad $8 turkey sandwiches while she was dining on $28 salads. He printed everything. The stack of paper was 3 inches thick. He organized it all into a binder with neat tabs for each year. He was not just a husband anymore. He was a plaintiff. On Monday morning at 7:08 a.m., he showered, shaved, and put on the same $600 Brooks Brothers suit he had worn to the party. It felt different now. It felt like armor. He walked out of the condo without a word to Eshe, who was sitting at the kitchen island, her face pale and puffy from crying. At 9 a.m. sharp, he was in a leather chair in a high-rise office on LaSalle Street. Across a large mahogany desk sat Alani Washington, a highly recommended divorce attorney. She was a formidable-looking black woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, and her natural hair styled in a severe, elegant updo. Her suit was a crisp, dark blue that probably cost more than his, her firm build at $200 an hour, and required a $15,000 retainer. Trey didn't flinch. He transferred the funds from his personal savings account, a small one he'd kept from before the marriage, with a meager $25,000 in it. He didn't give her a long, emotional story. He simply placed the binder on her desk. "My name is Trey Wallace," he began, his voice calm and even. "My wife's name is Eshe. We have been married for 10 years. For the last 6 years, I believe she has been fraudulently diverting marital assets into a secret bank account." He opened the binder. "Here are my pay stubs, our joint account statements, and my analysis of the diverted funds. The total is approximately $180,000. The catalyst was a public admission from her cousin at our anniversary party on Saturday night. Her cousin's name is Ravi Sharma." Alani Washington looked at the meticulously organized binder. She flipped through a few pages, her expression unreadable. She looked at the spreadsheet he had created, at the highlighted transfers. She looked up at Trey, at the steady, unwavering gaze of this quiet engineer. Most clients came in with tears and rage. This man came in with data. She admitted to the account's existence but claimed the balance was $20,000 to $30,000. Trey continued, "The account is with Chase Bank." Alani closed the binder. She looked at Trey, and a small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. It was a smile of professional appreciation. "Mr. Wallace," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative, "you've done most of my paralegal's work for her. This is clean. It's concise. It's provable." She leaned forward. "Here is what we are going to do. We will file for divorce this morning on grounds of irreconcilable differences. Simultaneously, we will file a motion for discovery and issue a subpoena duces tecum directly to J.P. Morgan Chase for all records pertaining to any and all accounts held by Eshe Adebayo, solo or joint, for the past 7 years. They will have 10 business days to comply. We will have the subpoena served to her personally at her place of employment." Trey nodded. "Good." "She will be served tomorrow," Alani said, already making notes on a legal pad. "And we will petition the court to freeze the account immediately, pending the discovery process." Trey felt a weight lift from his shoulders, not of sadness, but of uncertainty. The path forward was now clear. It was a process, a system. And for the first time in days, he was in a system he could trust. He stood up and shook Alani's hand. Her grip was firm. "Thank you, Ms. Washington." "Call me Alani," she said. "And don't you worry, Trey. We're going to get your money back." The strike was executed with the swift, silent precision of a surgical drone. On Tuesday afternoon, at exactly 1:14 p.m., a professional process server, a stern-looking man in a nondescript gray suit, walked into the open-plan Wicker Park office where Eshe worked as a consultant. He approached her desk, where she was pretending to review a marketing deck, and asked, "Are you Eshe Adebayo?" Her head snapped up. "Yes." "You've been served," he said, placing a thick manila envelope on her desk. He turned and walked out. The entire exchange took less than 15 seconds. Every head in the small office turned to stare. Her boss, a woman named Chloe, raised an eyebrow from behind her glass office wall. The public nature of the delivery was a specific, calculated choice, made by Alani Washington. It was designed to prevent Eshe from hiding or denying receipt. It was also designed to humiliate. Trey was at the Boeing facility inspecting the landing gear assembly of a 787 Dreamliner when his phone, which he kept on silent in his locker, began to vibrate. He ignored it. He knew what it was. He finished his inspection, signed off on the paperwork with a steady hand, and only then did he walk back to the locker room. He had 7 missed calls from Eshe and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. He read them with the detached curiosity of an analyst reviewing system alerts. 1:15 p.m. "Trey, what is this? Some man just gave me papers at my desk. Call me now." 1:17 p.m. "Divorce? Are you insane? And a subpoena? What the hell is a subpoena? 1:19 p.m. This is a mistake. You have to call this off. This is not happening. 1:30 p.m. My boss saw. Everyone saw, Trey. My colleagues are staring at me. How could you do this to me? How could you humiliate me like this? 1:45 p.m. I'm calling your mother. 1:52 p.m. She's not answering. You probably told her not to, you monster. He put the phone down and went back to work. An hour later, he checked again. There were more messages, and now voicemails. He listened to them one by one, his expression unchanging. The arc of her response was predictable. Anger, denial, pleading, manipulation. Voicemail 1 logged at 2:04 p.m. Angry. Trey, you pick up the phone right this instant. You have no idea what you've just done. This is a legal document about my money, my security. You have no right. You think you can just march in with some lawyer and take what's mine? You are going to regret this, I swear to God. Voicemail 2 logged at 3:31 p.m. Pleading. Baby, please, okay? I'm sorry I wasn't honest, but we can talk about this. Just us. We don't need these lawyers. They just make things ugly and expensive. I was scared, Trey. I just wanted something of my own. Please, just call me. We can fix this. I know we can. Voicemail 3 logged at 5:02 p.m. Crying. You're destroying our lives. You're destroying me. 10 years, Trey. You're throwing away 10 years of marriage over some stupid money. Doesn't what we had mean anything to you? I love you. I still love you. Doesn't that matter at all? He listened to the last message, her voice thick with manufactured sobs. He remembered her dismissal of his family, her sneering at his job, her contempt for his simple pleasures. He remembered the years of lies, the thousands of dollars she had stolen from their future while he was eating his sad sandwiches and fixing the plumbing himself. Doesn't that matter? He felt the answer in the profound emptiness of his own heart. It didn't. Not anymore. With a few taps on his phone, he created new audio files of the voicemails, labeled them Eshe VM1, Eshe VM2, and Eshe VM31, and emailed them to Alani, Washington, with a simple subject line, FWD, Communications from Respondent. Then he blocked Eshe's number. He blocked her on every social media platform. He cut the connection. The strike was complete. The next phase was the damage assessment. He left the Boeing facility at his usual time, got into his paid-off Honda, and drove home to his condo, a place that was finally, unequivocally, his alone. The silence he drove into was no longer heavy and oppressive. It was light. It was clean. It was free. What do you think is the most painful part of a betrayal like this? Is it the lies, or the money, or the time you can never get back? Share your thoughts with the community. Trey's journey to justice was just beginning, and the truth was about to come out in excruciating detail. The consequences cascaded with the brutal, dispassionate force of a legal judgment. Eshe had built her life on a foundation of lies and Trey's money, and with that foundation removed, the entire structure collapsed upon itself, piece by painful piece. Alani, Washington had been right. The paper trail Trey had assembled was irrefutable. First, there was the account itself. 8 days after the subpoena was served, a thick package arrived at Alani's office via courier from the legal department of J.P. Morgan Chase. The bank records were even more damning than Trey had imagined. The account, opened 6 years and 2 months prior, did not contain the $20,000 or $30,000 Eshe had claimed. The current balance was $183,219.47. But the statements told a far more insidious story. They detailed not just the deposits, the diverted bonuses, the skimmed monthly income, but also the withdrawals. Eshe hadn't just been saving the money, she had been spending it lavishly on a secret life. There was a $400 charge For a solo trip to Paris, she had told Trey was a work conference paid for by a client. There were regular charges from designer boutiques on Oak Street, a $2,400 Burberry trench coat, a $800 Celine handbag, shoes from Christian Louboutin totaling over $3,000. There was a $4,800 payment to the L'Auberge de Sedona resort, the very work retreat she had sworn was covered. The statements were a perfect, notarized record of her deceit. Alani had them entered into evidence immediately. Second, there was the legal ruling. The divorce proceedings were swift and merciless. Because Trey's condo was a premarital asset, it was never in question. His Boeing pension and his 401k, earned through his own labor, were also protected. The battle was over the joint assets and, most critically, the hidden Chase account. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had seen every trick in the book, was not amused by Eshe's claims that it was her personal security fund. The funds in this account, the judge declared in court, her voice ringing with authority, were derived from marital income earned by Mr. Wallace. They were diverted and deliberately concealed from him. This constitutes financial fraud. The judgment was devastating for Eshe. The court awarded Trey 60% of the hidden account's contents, totaling $109,931.68 as punitive damages for the fraud. Furthermore, the judge ordered that all of Trey's legal fees, which amounted to a staggering $28,500, were to be paid directly from Eshe's remaining 40% share. Third, there was the financial ruin. After the judgment, Eshe was left with what remained of her secret fund, $73,287.79, minus Trey's $28,500 in legal fees. Her final takeaway from 6 years of scheming was a paltry $44,787.79. But her problems were just beginning. During their marriage, she had secretly opened several high-interest credit cards in her own name, using them to finance the parts of her lifestyle that even the secret account couldn't cover. She had assumed she could pay them off with the nest egg when the time was right. She was carrying over $50,000 in debt across 3 different cards. The small sum she was left with was immediately swallowed by her creditors. She was, for the first time in her adult life, broke, truly broke. Fourth, the social and familial collapse was total. The story, in its raw, factual detail, spread through their families. Ravi, sober and deeply ashamed of his role in the implosion, called Trey and apologized profusely, offering to testify on his behalf if needed. Eshe's parents, who had always praised her ambition, were mortified. They saw the bank statements. They saw the lies. The auntie who had preached about a woman needing her own money called Trey, not Eshe, to say, "I meant for security, not for thievery. I am so sorry, son." The friends whose lifestyles she had so desperately tried to emulate, Janelle with her Jura coffee machine, Derek the vulture capitalist, distanced themselves. Her deception made them nervous. She was no longer an aspirational peer. She was a liability. She was utterly alone. Fifth, there was the loss of the life she had pretended to have. Without Trey's income or her secret fund, she could no longer afford the $580 monthly payment on her leased Acura RDX. She had to voluntarily surrender it, destroying her credit score. She was forced to move out of the trendy Wicker Park neighborhood. She found a small, dreary studio apartment in Rogers Park for $1,400 a month, a place with old appliances and a view of a brick wall. The glamorous, curated life she had projected on social media vanished overnight. Trey watched none of this happen directly. He heard about it through Alani or through the occasional reluctant update from his sister. He felt no joy, no schadenfreude. He only felt a vast, quiet relief. The final consequence was for him. He was free. He changed the locks on his condo. He sold the $200 crate and barrel couch she had loved and bought himself a simple, comfortable leather armchair for $800. He was clearing out the last remnants of the facade, preparing the space for a life of authenticity. The consequences were not his revenge. They were simply the system correcting itself. 1 year later, the sunlight that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Trey's West Loop condo seemed brighter. The space, once cluttered with Eshe's decorative pretensions, the faux marble sculptures, the coffee table books she'd never opened, the endless array of throw pillows, was now a reflection of its owner, clean, functional, and filled with an unassuming warmth. The walls were painted a soft, calming gray. Where a large abstract painting that cost $3,000 once hung, there was now a simple, framed schematic of a jet engine, a piece of art that held genuine meaning for him. The condo was filled with plants, their green leaves thriving in the morning light. On a small balcony, he had built a set of planter boxes, a small garden where he grew tomatoes and herbs. It was a place of quiet, purposeful growth. Trey's life had been similarly reconfigured. At Boeing, he had been promoted to a senior QA manager position, a role that came with a salary bump to $145,000 and the responsibility of leading a team. But the real change, was in how he used his expertise outside of work. He had joined the board of a nonprofit organization called Chicago Eshe Ascend, a mentorship program for young black men and women from the city's south and west sides who were interested in careers in engineering and skilled trades. 2 Saturdays a month, he would spend the morning at a community workshop, teaching teenagers how to read technical drawings, how to use precision measurement tools, how to think with the methodical rigor of an engineer. He saw the spark of understanding in their eyes, the same spark he felt when he solved a complex problem. He was helping them build their own foundations, not of money, but of skill and confidence. He was creating a legacy, a real one, far more valuable than the narrative Eshe had once accused him of lacking. His days found a new, healthier rhythm. He still woke up early, but now it was to the smell of good coffee, from a simple but high-quality $250 Technivorm Maca Master, a gift he had bought for himself. His runs along the lakefront path became a cherished ritual. He'd run for miles, the vast blue expanse of Lake Michigan on one side, the magnificent Chicago skyline on the other. The steady rhythm of his feet on the pavement was a form of meditation, a way of processing the past and embracing the quiet strength of the present. His deep brown skin, once pale with stress under fluorescent office lights, was now luminous and radiant from hours spent in the sun. He rarely thought of Eshe. When he did, it was with a distant clinical pity. He had heard through the grapevine that she was attempting to rebrand herself as some kind of online life coach, her social media filled with inspirational quotes about resilience and authenticity that rang hollow to anyone who knew the truth. He felt a pang of sadness, not for her, but for the man he had been, the trusting, naive man who had poured so much of himself into a project that was doomed from the start. He understood now that he had been in love with a facade, not a person. He had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his. Forgiveness was the final step in his own quality assurance process, the act of signing off on the repair and closing the book on the failure. It was a release, an unclenching of a fist he didn't even realize he'd been holding. He was no longer a victim of her betrayal. He was the architect of his own peace. As he stood on his balcony one evening watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple over the city, he felt a profound sense of contentment. The glass towers that surrounded him no longer felt like symbols of a life he couldn't attain, but simply a part of the beautiful, complex city he called home. He had learned a hard lesson, one that wasn't taught in engineering school. True wealth isn't a number in a hidden bank account. It's not a designer dress or a luxury car. It's the integrity of your work. It's the strength of your character. It's the community you build and the peace you find in your own heart. It's the quiet satisfaction of a life built on a foundation of truth, a structure you can stand in proudly, knowing it will hold. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up after a painful experience? What did you learn about your own strength in the process? Share your story of resilience in the comments below. Your journey could be the inspiration someone else needs to see today.